Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the special call meeting in reference to the revision to the FY22 general fund budget. It's 4:31, and we have Mr. Sailors, Dr. Sipes, Ms. Bush, Mr. Me, Ms. Edwin Caldwell, and Ms. Glenda Morrison Fair, and Mr. Sailors, and myself, Linda LaVennis Wells. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. LaVennis Wells. Good afternoon. As I'm sure you all will recall, we had a discussion at the final approval for the FY22 budget that there were still some uncertainties from the legislature. Since that time, the legislature has reached the point that they normally reach earlier than the middle of June, and that is they have a Senate and House version that now gives us the worst case, best case scenario, which normally we have that earlier in the process. The most significant change that is now agreed upon by both the House and the Senate version is a $1,000 increase to the base teacher pay. So that is $1,000 to every step on the schedule, i.e. every teacher in this district and every other district. There is some incoming state revenue that will not fully fund that, but there is some revenue. It increases the deficit amount we have in our budget. So we're not as positive as we were. We had that down to about 14 million. As we shared with you in the workshop session and in first reading, I'm not sure what the...
That's okay, keep going.
No. Oh, okay. I don't need to stop talking then. It puts us at a change in fund balance to utilize an additional $6.8 million. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. The biggest reason that we have an increased deficit is the state is funding the step increases. The revenue they send to us for the step, not the flat $1,000, but the step, in a way we have never seen them do it before. That is, they only are sending us funds for teachers who were employed last year and employed again this year. In years past, they sent funding based on all employees all teaching employees from the previous year. So what that has the effect of doing, you're already short because we pay above the state minimum. We're only going to send the state minimum step increase. By not sending funds for every teacher we had employed for every position, they make an assumption that every teacher that left us was replaced with a teacher of lesser experience, which is not true. We don't replace every teacher that leaves us with a teacher of lesser experience. In normal years, and this is reasonably normal year as far as replacing teachers, including the 39 new teaching positions we have, we're replacing 600 teachers. That's a pretty normal number for us. But that method of sending us revenue is unlike any way they have done it before. Now, we believe there may be some additional state revenue that will come to us when they complete the budget process. So the state revenue number we've included in your materials is the most conservative number. So it could go up a little bit and could reduce our dependency to a lesser amount than we've indicated. Again, we're focusing on utilizing less fund balance than we presented at the workshop or the first reading. It's just an increase of 6.8 from the amount presented at second and final reading. in general to make up for the additional expense for the $1,000 increase, because it will not cover the whole $1,000. We don't believe. And to cover the shortfall in the amount of revenue provided for the required teacher steps. The other thing that is unusual here is the state legislature mandated a $1,000 increase to school nurses, audiologists, and occupational and physical therapists, which are not necessarily on district's teacher salary schedule and not on ours. And they have never in the past mandated a salary increase for, to my knowledge, for non-classroom teacher employees. So that adds $155,000. This base pay increase adds $6.96 million. Bus driver salaries. You all will probably recall the state provides a salary for our bus drivers of, I believe, $7.53. Now, I think you can imagine how many bus drivers we could hire for $7.53. But they did increase that minimum. We are way above the minimum. If you look in your materials, you will see a reminder of where we are with bus driver salaries in the budget you approved for FY22. We moved 0 to 3 years to $16.32, 4 to 6 to $17.96, 7 plus to $20.23. Now, the House version proposes an 8% increase and the Senate version a 7%. So it'll either be an 8 or a 7%. Remember, on $7.53, not a 7 or 8% on what we pay, but on $7.53. But the way it's written, to qualify for the additional funding that they would send to us for their 7 to 8% increase, we've got to move that 0 to 3 from 1632 to 1657. So we have to move it by 25 cents an hour. Certainly a good thing to do, because we obviously have a problem attracting bus drivers, but that adds $60,000 to our cost. So the changes that you will see all have to do with pay. Base teacher pay of $1,000. School nurses, audiologists, occupational and physical therapists of $1,000. The teacher one, $6.9 million. The school nurse, audiologist, occupational and physical therapist, $155,000. And the bus driver salary adjustment cost to our budget $60,000, which brings our revisions to $7.175 million and our overall expense budget to $721,947,000. Now on the revenue side, state aid to classrooms, we show an increase EFA formula of 1.175. An increase of employer fringe of $327,000, and a decrease in state aid to classrooms from what we'd already sent to you of $2.3 million. An increase in school bus driver revenue of $709,000. We're also able to increase the transfers from food service and special revenue in indirect costs by adjusting the percentage to still within an allowable amount of $438,000. That revises our revenue to $715,100,000 plus an additional recommended utilization of fund balance of $6,847,000. When you look at that, you'll see there the budget revisions, revenue changes that I just described to you, additional required fund balance. The total revenue and fund balance change is 7.175. And the changes in expenditures, all of which are driven by the budget that is agreed upon between the House and the Senate version. And that's an increase in base teacher pay of by $1,000, school nurses, audiologists, and occupational and physical therapists by $1,000, and making that 25 cents an hour adjustment to our minimum salary, which is already double the state's bus driver wage. So a total of $7.175 billion in expenditures. And there you see the two summarized together. We'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have about any portion of that.
Mr. Sailors.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the revised fiscal year 22 general fund budget of $721,947,000.
With a second by Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. So the motion was made by Mr. Sailors, seconded by Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sutter.
Since we've increased, what does that do to our fund balance?
It decreases your fund balance by $6,847,000, which would bring fund balance to the staff.
At this point, it would be a little over $250 million.
250. I don't know if it sounds fit. That $250 million. So.
Anything else, Mr. Sutter?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Would you like for me to come back to you?
What's our overall fund balance?
Just a second. I didn't bring that one. Okay, sorry about that. Through the month of April, which is in the financial statements we're presenting tonight, the fund balance unassigned is $245.8 million, but that is just through April. So we have May and June still to go, and we have adjustments for year end.
What does May and June help us with? Does that improve or decrease or what? When we say we've got two,
It will increase.
Will also increase significantly in the fall.
Yes, sir.
what percent does that put us at on fund balance?
Percent of fund balance to general fund budget, Rob? You'll have to calculate that. It'll take her a second.
If I use April, that's 34%.
All I have. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Meek.
Thank you. Dr. Royster, what will be that, how long will it take us to get to that edge of the cliff?
This utilization, further utilization of fund balance brings us to just under 3%,
2.99%.
2.99, so right at 3%. We're still very confident that within a 5-year period, that's a percentage that's relatively easily overcome. Now, to be careful and cautious adding to it in future years. But 3% of your general fund budget, particularly given growth in millage, should not be an issue to overcome. So we would never recommend to you to dig a hole that we thought would require either significant cuts or dramatic tax increases to overcome.
Do you know of any things that we will be pulling out of the, asked to be pulled out of the reserve fund
Yes,
in
sir.
the future?
And again, some of that comes into play with how we plan and utilize ESSER funding. But one of the things that we are likely going to be recommending to you in the fall and as we move forward, is we've done this fairly significant we call it a small facility study, but it really includes a lot of buildings. Probably going to be some recommendation to utilize fund balance to meet some of those building replacement needs.
You and your staff are very confident that 5 years, we should be able to get it back.
Yes, sir. And that'll be what we'd be saying to the bond rating companies that we plan for this to be a 5-year utilization. Generally speaking, we're going to say 5 and believe that we can do it sooner than that.
As you mentioned, the bond rating companies, will this affect our bond rating in the
No,
next
sir.
5 years?
No, sir. Not a planned expenditure, planned utilization of fund balance, given our healthy fund balance should not affect our bond rating whatsoever.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lewis?
Just a couple of questions about the $1,000. So first, the current starting pay for teachers is $41,500.
Yes, sir.
Does this $1,000 raise that to $42,500, or does
It raises it exactly to $42,515.
So even though the General Assembly only approved $1,000 for teachers who'd been here more than,
For this is for every teacher.
so this applies to every teacher?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the step increase would not, but this does. Yes, sir.
And that stipulation that it only be for teachers who have been here for more than 2 years for the step increase, was that?
That's the step increase. And they have to have been here last year and again this year, or they're not counted.
Last year being 2019 and 2020?
20 and 21.
Do they
1920, 2021. In the past, if they were on 1920, we got funded for them.
Okay.
Again, it's not 100, even if they funded 100% of them, it's not 100% funding, but that helped offset the fact that there was always a shortfall.
Okay.
But this has a compounding effect. It affects us 3 times. They calculated the retro pay this way, which was the first time we'd seen it done. So we got the revenue for the retro pay when they've given us, and we're still debating with them whether that's an accurate final number. We're challenging the fact they're using the 2 years worth. So the retro for this year, they calculated the revenue that way, which means we're paying those people again next year. So it has an effect this year and next year. Then it has an effect on the people we hire this year who are more than a 0-year experienced teacher. So it has a kind of a 3-fold effect on funding teachers out.
The other, just to confirm, make sure I heard you correctly. So the current Greenville County School proposed bus driver pay is $1,632, and we're going to raise that to $1,657.
Yes, it moves entry level, and we've got them grouped by years now. So 0 to 3, it moves from 1632 to 1657. It doesn't move 4 to 6 or 7 plus. You all acted to move those appreciably in the regular budget approval process, and there 4 to 6 is $17.96 an hour, and 7 plus is $20.23 an hour.
The state of South Carolina's funded per hour for drivers is $7.53.
$7.53 an hour. I believe that's correct. Is it $7.53 or $7.50?
785 is their
780.
starting.
That's the new one.
That's the current.
I'm sorry, $7.85.
How is it possible that school districts are able to find bus drivers at $7.85?
They can't unless they supplement the wage. And I don't know of a district that doesn't supplement the wage. There may be one, but I don't know who it would be.
Well, thanks for coming back to us, well, I appreciate it.
Else, Mr. Lewis? Okay. Anyone else? I am just amazed that these bus drivers, that they would think that they could support themselves when you can't hardly get a meal at Chick-fil-A for $7.85.
It was only about 5 years ago, Stephanie, that it was when was that big raise? It jumped from like $3.50 to $7 in a year. About 5 years ago, does that sound right? Well, you can get anybody do anything for $3.50 an hour.
They can't.
Bus driver, but
I'm just a little concerned that they don't understand the value of bus drivers and picking up our children from home and getting them to school and back home safely. It makes no sense to me. This $1,000, is this recurring funding? Or is this a one-time and then we have to continue it with these step increases and so forth? I'd like to know where we are in the big picture.
historically, anytime the state requires and funds a teacher raise, even if they don't fully fund it, there is an ongoing funding of that raise.
So that's a continuation. We won't have to come up with that money.
No more than we're already having to come up with. You're always going to come up with some of it.
You didn't have a question earlier. I would have called on them as well. Go ahead. You got to turn on the
Push the
bottom.
button on the bottom.
Okay.
Take it a second to cycle up.
Help me with this, Dr. Royster, the $1,000, since Ms. Levitas Wells asked about that. The teacher scale, they have, let's say you're on step 15.
Mhm.
They have a number. And so what they've done is they've added $1,000 to that number.
Yes.
Okay. But our salary schedule is already higher than that number for that step.
Yes.
So were there any steps that we had to add? So why did we have to add the $1,000 if our step's already above what that would have gotten us to? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so. I suppose that we could calculate how much we added to steps that we weren't required to add and taken the difference from the $1,000. So I'm gonna make up a number. Maybe it was $200. So then we'd be required to add 800 that we hadn't already done this year. That's certainly not a recommendation that we felt comfortable bringing to you. We want, because we believe that obviously in the latest surveys of teachers leaving the profession now fully reveal this, at least the latest that we've seen, that's the number one reason teachers are leaving. So we think and recommend to you that you apply the whole $1,000.
Okay. So we're already above.
We're well above the state minimum, which may have also been your point.
Right back to the bus driver.
And what you all acted to do, as we'd recommended to you earlier this year, was to move every teacher. And even if they're not getting a step, we added a step at the end that moved them by 2%. We also recommended and you all approved smoothing the raises to 2%, because now the steps, they used to range from right at 1% to over 3%. When they improved the entry level pay for teachers, they reduced that. Now the differential, some of the steps are 0.56% in height, all the way up to over 3%. And so the budget that was approved earlier moves everybody a minimum of 2%, whether they would be entitled to a step or not. And it moves that 0.56, it moves it up to 2%. And it doesn't, if somebody's getting 3%, it doesn't drop them to 2%, they still get 3%. And we have always recommended, and you all have always approved a pure percentage applied to what we pay them already. You can apply that percentage only to the state minimum. We have never recommended that, nor have you all ever approved doing it that way. We've always approved a true percent raise on what they already made.
And I always have to ask that question because it's hard to kind of keep that in your head that even though we talk about the state's step increase and the state's schedule, we don't operate by that schedule. So this increase we would take, we're taking because we believe we've got to stay in line where we are to make sure our teachers are not leaving, right?
Yes, this should keep us at the top in teacher pay. And instead of as you could have done in other circumstances, you could have done less than this. The commitment's always been really to do more because of where it's going, and that's going to teacher pay to improve teacher conditions to attract and retain teachers.
So then, and then the connection to that is just that if we did have a concern that we're going to dig a hole and get to a cliff that we can't overcome, that what could have been an alternative if we were uncomfortable, if you weren't confident that we can get back out of the hole that we're in, relying on fund balance.
Yeah, any of those things that we chose to do, that we recommended and you all selected that you chose to do, you could have done less than you chose to do, still met the minimum requirements, but as you all have traditionally done and as we've traditionally recommended, we try not to ever do the minimum.
So we have it in our pocket, so to speak, over the next 3 to 5 years, if necessary, if we really get to a spot where we're not really recovering and we're still relying on fund balance, that's an option always, I guess, in the future that we could always come back and look at, each budget year, you could look at how do we approach the step increases, the salary increases, and maybe have some latitude there.
It is, and it would be one of the last things, obviously, that we would recommend. Even if you go back to the recession, traditionally the administration, that was not something they recommended. Now we did this a couple of years where we're not required to give a pay increase and did not give one. But we did that in lieu of laying people off and or furloughing people. So people didn't make less money, nor did people they might have gotten a different job, but they didn't lose their job. So we've tried to make that one of the last resorts as far as a recommendation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Dr. Royster, I don't see there's too much we can do with this. This is what we've got. But I'm looking down the road. If down the road the cost of living goes up, will our balanced budget be improved or go down? Remember the last time when we had this fixed that our state was in, the costs were up so high? And now what about in the future that we have got our cost of living going up? Just like when we were building these schools, we had a period there when they kept going up and up and up, and we had to improve millions of dollars.
Yes, sir. And we're faced with very dramatically increasing construction costs right now. Of course, that's not something that we traditionally take from the general fund budget. We have recommended to you all, and you've approved in the past, utilizing some fund balance for construction projects and renovation projects. That's a concern. It's been a concern for the last several months because that's an area that's escalating at a greater rate than other areas in the economy. There's a twofold issue with inflation. You have inflation that you have the challenges for employees to meet the value of their paycheck going down, plus the goods and services that we purchase can be influenced by inflation. The other thing that's truly unique in the circumstances we're in right now, and the more you read about it, I think the more you see that it's unique as far as economic times. It's time for an adjustment in the economy. If you look back historically, but our current economic conditions seem to be defying the historic precedents. There were some sectors of the economy that were not affected at all, negatively affected by the pandemic. The other areas that were extremely negatively affected. And there's a concern right now, there's a huge housing bubble. And is that bubble going to burst? So we try to always watch all those trends out there in the future. How might that affect both what things cost us, what they cost our employees, and how might that affect income and tax revenue? Now, right now, preparing this year's budget, those things were all relatively positive indicators, but that may change over time. And it's very difficult to predict right now because it is so unlike other points in our economic history. But there's very much a difference in an economy that is affected, if you want to refer to a pandemic as like a natural disaster, and one that is affected by economic downturn, which are cyclical. There's always going to be rises and falls in the economy. And this is just very unusual.
Well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Anyone else? Hearing none. All in favor, please address by raising your right hand. All against, raise your right hand, and the motion passes.
Thank you. And the most important thing for us is now we can go out and start advertising to teachers. If you come to work for us, no years experience, you can start at 42,515.
Well, that makes us very marketable, and we are the best district in the state. So with that being said, we will adjourn. Without objection. All right, well, is there a motion? Motion was made by Mr. Sailors, seconded by Mr. B. All in favor, please address by saying aye.